Thank you, Jason, for doing this and for playing and for being here. I don't know if we're going to do this Q&A. I think you can just go. I did prepare initially, but the frequency right now here is very different than when I wrote down these questions. It's like there's this saying, the world renews itself in every moment. And this very moment, I'm in touch with that renewal. We spoke until we didn't do this last time. And then I wrote down some questions, and then we spent an hour before this moment. Like it's a whole other world. And then you're checking. So I'm like, focus a little to get this, and maybe geared with a few questions just to get started. And then just take it wherever you want to go. I invited you because I had a conversation with you. Not even I had a conversation. I listened to a conversation. All right. So the conversation we had was fun. It was a lot of fun. I had a great time. But then these girls walked up to you and asked you a question. And that's when I was like, I think it changed my life forever. Mm. I think that story and also how you have this gift of tracking. I think it's a gift, like really tracking. Either it's reflect, I don't know where it comes from, but the clarity to take 25 years, 40 years and really see like a little bit of the hidden links. It touched me deeply. And I started, since then I understand a little bit more of the bigness of a struggle or of a process. And so that was the first, like, I'm like, okay, I want more. And then if I want more, I want to share you with this group of men. Also, we had some conversation about addiction and quitting addiction. So I guess if you can share with us a little bit of your journey. I met you probably many, many years into the how it came about. Maybe a little bit of your journey with sobriety or with addiction, with supporting addiction, like anything you want to drop in for us.
Marty, first and foremost, appreciate you having me on. And as I said when I started this, there's no place in the world I'd rather be. And you hit the nail on the head. For an hour, I get to be in a room of no judgment. Now, Volvi already told me he's judging me a little bit. He's curious. And that's human, right? We're all always being judged. But what's safe about being in a room with like-minded people, and the reason I actually go to AA, guys, disclaimer, I'm a fellow of the Alcoholics Anonymous, is because for an hour, I get to just be Jason. And everybody in that room knows I fucked up. Everybody in that knows room, I live with guilt, shame, and remorse every single day. And I don't have to explain that. And there's a certain peace that comes with that. So, Marty, to answer your question, guys, I'm Jason, right? I'm 5 years sober as of March 14th from drugs and alcohol. Prior to that, the best way to describe me is I'm your fucking heroin addict, man. I'm a junkie. Shot dope into my veins. It didn't start there. Okay, the first drug I ever chased was my Jewish mother's love and attention as a middle child. Nothing I could do was ever good enough. And the truth is, at 43 years old, that hasn't changed. I've just learned how to cope with that and how to move forward with my life and my own happiness. But at 4 years old, you don't know any better. So you start getting in trouble because you know when you get in trouble, mom has to spend 15 minutes with you. Even if it's beating the shit out of me and tell me what a disappointment it is, I get that time. And so I learned that negative actions, and the news really, the media is no fucking different, right? Like they don't tell us the good stories because there's no juice in the good stories. Life is all about sensationalism. And I learned that at a very young age. The more sensational shit I do, the more attention I get. And so it started with just ringing on doorbells and running away or throwing. Actually, the first time I ever got in trouble, being this is a Jewish room, you guys will appreciate it. I didn't have the luxury of going to private school or Jewish school. I went to a public school that was racially diverse. And my kindergarten teacher told us how we spin the menorah on Hanukkah. And I corrected her. I said, Miss, we don't spin the menorah on Hanukkah. We spin the dreidel. Well, I learned right then and there, you don't question authority because then you get in trouble. And I was labeled bad in kindergarten for being factually correct. And so my whole life was twisted with these false understandings of life. The right one, you get in trouble. Being in trouble is actually pleasant. And my brain and my body, you hit on it. I have a weird way of thinking. And I'm sure everybody in here does, right? Like you don't end up addicted and in self-help because you think normal. We don't. And that's okay too. And I'm learning to be comfortable in that. But I took that and ran with it. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which is the 6th borough of New York. My dad was born in Haifa. I grew up in a reform home. My dad was a typical Israeli who very secular. Got bullied when he went to yeshiva at 13 years old for wearing a yarmulke, right? Got the shit kicked out of him. And my grandma is a Holocaust survivor and the traumatic of that. So fear and Judaism went hand in hand with me. I was afraid to be Jewish. I loved the tradition, but I had a lot of misunderstandings of who God was and what that meant. And so when you live a life that you're not spiritually attached to any type of higher power, where right and wrong are flipped upside down due to some early traumas and misrepresentations, and you're someone like me who doesn't learn the stove is hot because you touched it and it was hot, or because mom said don't touch the stove, it's hot. The only way Jason Lakritz learns the stove is hot is by touching it. And not touching it once or twice like an average fucking idiot, 5 or 6 times, because I'm Jason and I think, well, maybe if I touch it with my left hand, it won't burn. Or maybe if I could sneak around and get it from behind, it won't burn. It burned every time.
Jason, why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? I guess with you personally, but I'm talking really collectively, that if I touch the stove with my right hand and it burns, I'll touch it again. And then I'll go with my left hand. Like, why do you think that is? How come?
I think it has a little to do with like the early thing. I think we've all been in a situation where we knew we were right and we were being treated as wrong, or the other way around, right? Like the boy who cries wolf. We forget the back end of the story. But let's just say I'm a liar who's lied 10 times and this is the time I'm telling the truth and nobody believes me. Now I have a bastardized understanding of the truth. And the same is true of discipline. Probably from one time I touched something that wasn't hot that somebody said it was, and I had this I told you so. And so now my ego, I'd rather be right than happy. And Marty, if I could touch a stove that you told me was hot and find a way that it doesn't burn.
So there's power in that?
Fuck yeah, there's power in that. I'm right, you're wrong, you're stupid, I'm smart. If you're judging me, and I'm fearful of what you judge, the best way is to be better than you, right?
So the focus isn't the stove is hot. The focus is you say I can't, guess what, I can.
Correct. Absolutely. Guess what happens when you live a life? I think the Bible tells a story when God says don't and we do. Eventually you get Babylon, no? Like society's going to crumble. And that's what addiction does. So it started very early on. I was living like an addict before the first substance ever hit my system. I manipulated to get what I wanted, whether that was by touching a hot stove so I could tell you it wasn't, finding a loophole, working harder to find a loophole than the actual work itself. My train was set to crash since the day I came out of the womb. I believe that. But there's beauty in the wreckage. And so what happened for me, I never fit in, okay? I had an extremely high intelligence level, but I was athletic. Not quite rich, not quite poor. Jewish, but not Jewish, right? Like I was in between a lot of identities and didn't know where to fit in. I'm in advanced classes at school, but hanging out with the athletes who are notoriously dumb. So the athletes think I'm smart. The scholars think I'm a jock. Nobody wants to be Jason's friend. I started acting in ways that I thought people would think I was cool. And you know what people think we're cool when you're young? Getting fucked up and doing stupid shit that they go laugh at you for. Not really because they love me. They love laughing at me. And I'll never forget the first time I smoked a joint. And I was laughing with everybody else laughing at me. And I felt good. It was the first time I felt like I was part of a group of people that got what it was like to be Jason. For the first time in my life, my brain quieted down and stopped judging me on whether what I said was actually funny or whether you like laugh. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure y'all done that. Are you laughing because you're just being nice, or did that actually funny? Are you hugging me because you love me, or are you hugging me because people are looking at you? And my mind was constantly analyzing this. Every interaction, so deep, and it was so noisy and so exhausting. And then I hit this pipe. It was quiet. They were just laughing with me for the first time. I was 13 years old. It was actually at a friend's bar mitzvah. Got high for the first time. I said, I like that feeling. Now, here's the difference between an addict and a normal person. A normal person likes that feeling, no big deal. Me, I spent that next night scheming on how I'm going to find somebody to sell me that weed, how I'm going to learn how to roll a joint by tomorrow morning, because I can't imagine walking to school without it. Well, weed became alcohol. Alcohol became pills, cocaine, ecstasy. Car accident gets me ecstasy pills. Before I know it, I'm shooting dope. A nice Jewish kid from Fort Lauderdale in a gated community growing up. Drugs don't discriminate. Talk about guilt, shame, remorse. It took me till last year to get a key to my mom's house again. Last year. Found out she's moving and she didn't even tell me. And I'm not mad that she didn't tell me. I'm mad because my key isn't going to work and I waited 42 fucking years to get one. But when we tell our story in this program, we say what it was like. What it was like is I was a terrified man in a big body. Physical strength beyond my mental capacity. So my anger led to violence. Violence came to a reputation. Reputation, again, what do people think? Well, once you got known as a badass and power and respect that comes with that and fear, that's not God's will, but I lived my will and I forced my way through it. And it was an advantageous position for me, Marty, because I had the intelligence to outsmart people and I had the physical strength to shut them fuck up right now if I wanted to. And depending on the way, I got what I wanted with one of those two means. And it worked. But the only person I was fooling was me because I wasn't under a bridge like a typical dope fiend. I was actually having a job. So I didn't think I was an addict. I didn't finally figure it out till I was 37 years old. Without a dollar to my name, ex-wife hates me. My daughter doesn't want to talk to me. Lost a house. Every good thing I ever did in life had a horrible, tragic end to it. Made a billionaire business making $500,000 a year off the scratch. And it came down to nothing. And I fucked over every one of my customers because I was a drug addict. Being able to not go to the grocery store because like Yankee, I promised I'd give you that $1,000 before the trip. And I fucked up and didn't have it. And instead of being a man and telling you, I'd lie to you some more and hide from you. That was me. Of course I have anxiety. Of course I had panic attacks. The life I was living was drug fueled. I needed to feel good now at any cost. Well, what happened, luckily for me, is dope kills. Heroin kills people. I was going to die. And Marty, I don't know if I told you this story, guys. This is a true story. I've always had an intuition, and this is where God has been in my life way before I knew he was in my life, way before I found him and understood his power. But I was lucky because I'd be selling dope at a party and I'd get a gut feeling. It's time to go. And unlike the stove, I didn't want to fuck around with this gut feeling. I didn't need to prove it wrong. I would leave. And the next day, I grew up before social media, so it's not like I saw on Facebook, but the next day we'd find out that party got raided, people got arrested, and I'd skirt away. And I never felt guilty that the people I was setting up were the ones getting in trouble and I'd keep walking away. A lot of guilt came from that. But after overdose, after overdose, after attempt to stop, after facing death in the doors and surviving again, and I treated God like a hooker. Hey, God, if you don't let me die tonight, I promise I'll pray tomorrow. Sounds a lot like, hey, if I give you $10, it'll suck. God's not a prostitute, but my relationship with God was very transactional. At 22 years old, I got in trouble. I faced the rest of my life in prison. I got locked up, no bond, threw away the key. Mandatory minimum is 25 years in prison. Took 9 months in jail, in the worst jail in the state of Florida, just to get a court hearing, just to determine if I'm eligible for bond. In those 9 months, because I was facing the rest of my life, I wasn't classified with other drug addicts or credit card fraud or people with marijuana. I was in there with people going away for the rest of your lives. And I learned misery. And I learned powerless. I watched people get killed 3 feet from me. Nobody cared. I watched us get starved, get treated like fucking animals, live in a cage for 23 hours a day, get to shower twice a week at best. I lived in fear that when I'd call my parents, they wouldn't answer because of a tragedy and I'd be stuck in jail while they were dead. We'd have a set time for me to call and God forbid their dinner went a little bit over. I didn't go. My sponsor now jokes. I create catastrophes in my head over nothing. And I did that every night in jail. If I couldn't reach them, it wasn't that their dinner went 10 minutes longer. It was that, God forbid, they were in a car accident or they don't love me anymore. It was never just like, what if they couldn't answer the phone? This is the thought process that Jason has every day. It's why I use drugs. It quieted it. Heroin's the best quieter because you can't think when you're asleep, and that shit would just knock me out. My only social interaction for 7 years straight was meeting up with the dope man once a day and convincing myself that he liked me because I was spending $150 there. And Volvi, I actually cared what that motherfucker thought about me, if I impressed him, if he thought I was cool, as I was showing up to his house covered in my own vomit because I didn't get my fix yet that morning. Talk about delusional, right? Like, how fucked up is that? This guy who charges me $150 just to walk in my house, I care what he thinks about me? I did. At the time, he was the closest thing I had to a friend. He made me feel better when I felt like shit. There's something to look forward to. It was human interaction. I forgave myself for whatever I did to have to come up with that $150 every single fucking day through loopholes and logic and manipulation of my own mind. God sees it all. And one day we have to face these truths of who we are as a person. They say until pain gets so bad that you can't handle it, will never change. And I think for our own reasons, everybody in this room could relate to that. No addict just left winning the lottery or left buying a Ferrari and then went to treatment. Doesn't work that way. And I'm not any different. I was going to die. And that intuition I was talking about started about a month. Every time I was shooting the dope, I was crying now. I wasn't even getting high. I knew I was going to die. And I didn't want to do it anymore, and I couldn't stop. And that's when I realized I'm fucked. Next day, crying, I don't want to die. I didn't really want to live. Don't get me wrong, guys. I didn't have a life worth living, and I didn't want to really live. I don't know if you can relate to that. But I also didn't want to put a gun to my head and pull the trigger, or I would have. I'm a big bad Jason. I'm not scared. I'll do that.
Maki shared something with me a while ago that's really gave me perspective. And he said that there's this concept of being passively suicidal. And it's unreal how many people live passively suicidal. And they don't fall in the category of a rescue team because they're not ready. They're not in the place to do it, but they really, really prefer not waking up.
Yes.
So that's a concept.
And Malky, that's excellent wording because I'm going to get to that exact phrase. Anyway, I'm going to get to why I'm here today. I knew I was going to die. I even started calling into treatment options. And here's how God works, okay? At this point, I lost a corporate career. I lost $500,000 income, and I'm working as a locksmith 24/7 on call, busting my ass at 3 a.m, drive all over the place, breaking into cars. Now, when you're a drug addict who needs money, that's an excellent skill set to have. Not to mention your customers pay cash. Okay, so again, I'm real good at finding a way to convince myself I'm not a drug addict. I wasn't robbing people that day. I was earning my money. I get a call in a very rich area at 3 a.m. to go unlock a kid out of a car. And it's called Sunrise Detox Center, and I didn't know that. It even existed there. And this kid's just broke out. He wasn't done. And he had a bag of dope in his car. And I could get in a car in under a minute 99% of the time. And this was a Honda Civic, which means 99% of the time to 100% of the time. But for forever fucking reason God was playing with me, it took me 30 minutes to get into this kid's car. Now he's sweating balls. His dope's in the car. He knows it's in the car. He just broke out. But he slipped and told me there's a bag of dope in the car. So now I'm shaking. I want that dope too. We can't get in. But while I'm trying, I asked him, what's up with this place? What do they do? I didn't know a place like that even existed. I've tried cold turkey. I made it to day 2 15 fucking times, and I couldn't get past that. And now you're telling me that there's this place that's going to help me detox, and I'm here? Fuck that place. Let's go get this dope. And I tell him, if I could get you in your car, can we go to the dope man now? And he says yes. For 3 months, I ride that. But I'm going to die. Can't stop. Can't stop. 6:30 a.m., I get a phone call from a childhood friend of mine, probably since 4th grade. His sister and I were in the Little Mermaid play in 2nd grade. I was Prince Eric and she was Ariel. That's how far back we go. And after college, we both got married, and you know how that goes. He's got kids. We lost touch. Always loved each other, but he didn't know I was deep in an addiction because we weren't friends like that. And he calls me and he says, Jason, and I'm like, yeah. He's like, I'm so happy you answered. I said, why, man? It's 7 a.m. What the fuck do you want? He's like, I just had a dream that I was at your funeral, that you didn't make it. Now, how does somebody I haven't spoken to in years have that if it's not God while I'm feeling I'm going to die? So I got to question him. Well, Matt, what'd I die of? Praying, he tells me a car accident. No, nobody would say, but everybody was whispering. That's an overdose. They're all judging my mom. He was an addict, right? Like the stigma that comes with addiction. Now I'm fucking fearful because now I know the end is here. I'm dying. I can't stop. I'm crying as I'm shooting dope. It's 8:15. I'm starting to get ready for work. I know I'm going to die, Matt, but no, I'm alive today. Well, my sister, who's 3 hours behind us because she lives in San Diego after she went to rehab for alcoholism and never came back and stayed in California, she calls me at 7 a.m. her time crying. And my sister is the only one in my life that I could be honest with. And Volvi, I never wore a mask with her. I didn't care if I impressed her or not because she loved me. She was my sister and I was her baby brother. And she was the one human being who I didn't have to ever worry because even at my worst, she loved me for me. And even when I disappointed her and broke her heart and fucked her over, she loved me for me. So I didn't have to wear a mask. And she knew how bad out I was. And she'd cover for me to mom and dad and lie to them and tell them how good I was doing. And, oh, the reason he didn't make it for Passover this year isn't because he doesn't love you. But, man, he had this going, and that's my big sister. She called me at 10 a.m., which was 7 a.m. her time, crying. And she just had a dream that she was at my funeral. Same fucking day as my friend Matt. The next day I went to treatment. That was March 14th of 2019. I haven't picked up a drug or a drink since. Since then, some of the hardest challenges of my life. But I don't have to make it worse for myself. What I felt made me feel better only made everything feel worse. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous challenged me as part of my recovery to create my own conception of God. So much of my issues with God was it didn't fit the mold. Remember, I questioned everything. If I don't like one story, and dude, I blew up the whole thing. No, Moses couldn't have split the Red Sea that way. That's fucking bull. There goes Judaism. It's bunk. That's how I used to think. Fucking stories are old. And they're still just that. They're stories. That's not Judaism. And it's interesting that by being explored to have my freedom to go anywhere, I have a stronger tie to Judaism than I ever did before. And Marty, this is kind of where we came in. But guys, let me tell you something. I did the 12 steps. I met a woman. I looked her in the eye on my very first date and said to her, and it was lying at the time, I said, I love myself. And because I love myself, I don't want to get in a relationship right now. I need to work on myself. That woman's my wife today. I have a life I never thought I could dream of. People like me. And those who don't bother me. I'm honest. I have integrity. I show up on time. My word matters. But most importantly, every fucking bad thing I've ever been through, from that incarceration to sticking dope in my hands, has already been put to use to help somebody go through something similar. So I've learned a few things over the years. And this is true for every one of us in here. And Isaac, I'm thinking of you for this. We've survived 100% of the worst times we've ever been through, everybody in here. We've survived 100% of the worst times of our lives. Furthermore, I can promise you this. God is going to use us for every bad thing we've ever been through to help somebody else get through it better than we did. And when I went through my first divorce, I did everything wrong. Not one thing right. But now I can help somebody avoid all those wrongs when they go through a divorce. And sure enough, I have a best friend going through a divorce. And I could tell him that drinking a bottle of tequila every night isn't the way to do it. Whether he listens to me or not is up to him. But he loves me and I love him, and I could tell him from my own pain. But I'm going to tell you guys that God is real. And I'm going to use this story because 2 years into my sobriety, I opened up a sober living home for women who were trying to get sober and dealing with the same fucking stigma we all deal with. Society's thrown us out, tossed us aside, and told us we can't change. And I don't care whether you're dealing with drug addiction, sex addiction, gambling addiction, or asshole or narcissism addiction. We can change if we choose to. It takes action steps. And so we got thrown out. We opened this home for these women that nobody else wanted to give a future to. And we started with 4 beds. 4 women we could help. A woman by the name of Dara Rapp comes up to my wife and asks for help. And all we had was 10 minutes in a car ride on the way to a meeting because we'd pick her up, and 10 minutes on a car ride on the way back from a meeting to get to know this human being. And over about a year, we opened up a little bit. And I finally decided to share that I faced the rest of my life in prison and I was incarcerated. And I have a lot of trauma from that. And Dara said, I'm so happy to hear that. I didn't have the courage to tell you because guess what? I was afraid you guys would judge me and I wanted you to like me. But I'm on trial facing 20 years in prison because the last time I drank, I ran over a off-duty police officer and paralyzed him. And I'm going to be going to prison for a long time. Well, guess what? It took me 19 years from when I got out of jail to finally realize why I had to go through all of that. That was my only regret 4 years into sobriety, 3 years into sobriety. The only part of the puzzle I didn't figure out why I had to do it. And here it was. And when she got locked up, and when she went away, she brought a picture of me in to remind her that she can be happy when it's over, that she could find love when it's over and laugh when it's over. Now, I don't want to talk about what I went through in there, what a day in the life of that was. Use your imagination. It sucked. But to be able to hear a young woman tell me I was the reason she's going to be able to get out and be something showed me God exists. Now, here's what's fucking crazy. Because my wife, who became her sponsor, and some other people in the program of AA testified on her behalf about her character, because trials in America, they take a long time. So when she did it to when she went to court, she had 2 years sober. She changed her life. And we have witnesses to that. Judge sentenced her to 10 years in prison. Said she has to serve 3. He said, I was going to give you 25, but I heard what these people had to say for you. She got out. And guess what? She called my wife and I to come pick her up. We walked her in and we were there because of the program, because I'm sober today, because I work on myself in programs just like Marty's to be better. I'm a fucked up person, man. I try every day to be better. And she called us to come pick her up. Now, guys, I'm going to tell you a miracle that can't happen if there's no God. We go to pick her up in Georgia. I was locked up in Florida 20-something years ago. She's a woman. I'm a man. We go to pick her up at this prison. We pull in. And Marty, you could talk about this more than me. I didn't know about trauma, how it could sit and simmer somewhere where no matter how deep you look in, you don't know it's there until the day it erupts. And this happened. We pulled up to the prison. And I haven't been behind those fucking barbed wire walls in 20-something years. All of a sudden, man, I start sweating, shaking, trembling, fucking almost shit myself. I'm crying hysterically. Well, I smoke cigarettes, so I know what I do. I need a cigarette. Step out of the car to go smoke a cigarette. As I'm about to light it, there's that green uniform, this big lady. She goes, get back in the fucking car. And I traumatized right back into inmate mode. And I learned the hard way, you don't fucking question them. And I jumped right back in the car. And in the middle of this panic attack and trembling of holy shit, I just got told what to do by a corrections officer again. And I swore that would never happen. I'm freaking out. Luckily, her shift ends. And as I'm about to throw up, this older black gentleman comes on out, and he lights up his cigarette, and he's working there. And I very timidly, and remember, I take pride in my alpha masculinity, I'll call it, and it's all bullshit. It's no such thing. But I take pride in it nonetheless. I'm terrified. And I roll down the window, and basically I say to this guy, "Sir," like a 3-year-old kid, no courage, no confidence. "Sir, can I join you for a cigarette? Please," begging. Says, "Yeah, as long as you're not going to ask me for one." I'm so grateful. Fuck, dude. I get out the car, I smoke a cigarette, and we're on a women's prison, and it's a low security camp, not anything I'm familiar with. Very low security. And they had men walking by. I guess the men take care of the yard. And one of the men said, "Hey, Mr. So-and-so, how's it going?" And he said, "Sir, I'm doing great." Now, as I in jail, I was never called a sir, and I never had anything nice to say to a correctional officer, and that was generally the rule. So I said to him, why did that guy just call you sir, and why did you call him sir back? That doesn't happen here. You know what he tells me? He said, "I've been in this profession for 25 years. When I started," he goes, "I was the worst of the worst. Mean motherfucker." He's like, "But 5 years ago, my nephew killed somebody. My nephew's a good man who made a bad mistake, and he deserves to be in prison, but he's a good human being. And the thought of people like me doing to people like him what we do broke my heart." I said, "Wow. Thank you." He's like, "Why are you saying thank you?" I said, "Because I've been on the receiving end of mean motherfuckers like you. And I know for these inmates to be able to have someone call them sir is life changing." He's like, "How do you know so much about this?" I said, "Well, 20 something years ago, I was locked up in Florida." He's like, "Oh, that's funny. 20 something years ago, I was just getting my start in Florida." I'm like, "Oh, well, I was in that mean motherfucker jail." He's like, "Oh, there's only one that's called that." I'm like, "So you know?" He's like, "That's where I started." I'm like, "Yeah, but I was on D-Pod, homie, with the people going for 25 years or plus." He's like, "That's where they put the mean motherfuckers like me." I'm like, "You see this scar right here?" He's like, "Yeah." He goes, "Was that you?" He said, "Most likely." One of the officers who physically assaulted me over and over and over again. 25 years later, I'm here having a cigarette with him as he's calling people sir. The same fucking man, and we remembered each other. He told me his name. And I left hugging him. I left freer than I've ever felt in my entire life. I almost forgot we were bringing our friend home from prison. As on cue, she walks through these gates. Everything happens for a reason. God has that reason. It's not my job to figure it out. God is either everything or else he is nothing. And if God is everything, then all of our suffering has to be for a purpose. And if our suffering for a purpose, then instead of the catastrophe we create in our head, when we get this moment of pause, we can ask, what is this purpose, God? How can I use this to be of service to my fellows? Guys, that shift in my thinking has been life-changing. When I got cancer, Marty, April 1st, it wasn't woe is me. It was I can't wait to help another guy get through this. And I knew I'd be okay. And on April 15th, they told me the surgery removed it all, and I know I'm blessed. God, thank you. What my challenge, guys, and what the challenge of life is, isn't when life goes good. Everybody could look good when life goes good. But as Jews especially, who have been oppressed and fucked with since day one, who are we when times go bad? And that favorite thing about being a Jew is when times are the worst, is when Judaism's the strongest. Again, proof that God is real. Now, I'm still not an organized religion individual. I'm getting there. My heart with God is a Jewish God for sure. I'm getting to the traditions and this and that. I'm working on it. But what I know is for me, God isn't lighting a bush on fire. But he speaks to me every fucking day, and I get the luxury of hearing him. And he speaks to me through people just like you. And Marty, that's why I wanted to be here, because God's here. God's there with Dara. God was there with me and that correctional officer. God was there 25 years ago when it was happening, just laughing as I was wondering why. God was there the first time I put a needle of dope in my arm. And God was there when I went through the 30 days of withdrawals after it. The only thing that changed was my thought process, my gratitude, my humility, my ego, all these things that were blocking it. Through this program or through therapy or through self-help, there's no monopoly on what has this success. For me, it's AA. For you guys, I don't know. But I can tell you this, by me committing today to be a better version of myself than I was yesterday, every single day, one day at a time, I've built a life that I could be proud of. I've built a life that I have no current shame or regrets for. I've built a life that I'm confident enough in who I am that when I fuck up, which I do every single day, I could say I'm sorry without it stinging. I've built a life that I'm okay enough to know that if my mom doesn't talk to me, it's not because I'm not unworthy of her son or her love. It's because she's sick and I pray for her to get better. 5 years sober, I have no relationship with my mother. She just bought and sold a house this weekend. I found out third party, the house that I grew up in. It's okay. She has her own journey and I have mine. I'm comfortable enough being Jason Lakritz today that I don't need her validation to prove to me I'm worthy of love. I have that within. Early on, I talked about how I broke every mirror I looked at because I hated myself. And Mario is a therapist who told me, if somebody physically caused me all the harm I caused myself, I would hate them too. I was my own worst enemy for my entire life. When I looked in the mirror, I saw Adolf Hitler. I did to myself what any worst enemy would do to their worst enemy. And I did it to myself over and over and over again. No wonder I couldn't look in the mirror. I hated the motherfucker looking across from me. But a funny thing happened. I got taught by a therapist who I didn't believe that it doesn't have to be that way, Marty. And Volvi, I asked you this, what was the payout for being safe, right? There was none for me, so I had no choice but to try. And as soon as I tried to show myself a little bit of grace, a little bit of forgiveness, a little bit of humanity, slowly but surely, guys, look, I have no teeth, okay? Because I couldn't look in the mirror long enough to brush my teeth. So finally, my life became so miserable, I just skipped that because this way I wouldn't have to stare into the soles of my eyes. But look now. I got top teeth and they're not falling out. Because I could look myself in the mirror long enough today to brush my teeth, to wash my face, to shave my own head without punching a hole in the fucking mirror. Didn't happen overnight. I went from slowly accepting myself and not hating myself to forgiving myself, to maybe thinking I might like myself, to definitely liking myself, to finally loving myself. I did that by talking to gentlemen just like you, crying in front of rooms full of people that usually I'd beat the shit out of just to tell them I don't cry, sharing in others' pains and actually feeling empathy, wanting to be of service like I was to those two girls at any opportunity, because that's why God picked me to live. And accepting the great responsibility that comes with that. And realizing there's a purpose on this earth that has nothing to do with Jason. Jason just gets to live the benefit of it. But if I wake up and I pray every day for God to show me how I could be his vessel, how I could be his burning bush for another motherfucker who needs to see it, there's a purpose worth waking up for. And when I have a purpose worth waking up for, I don't want to do it hungover. I don't want to do it dope sick. I have no desire to use drugs. Marty, you saw me while people were taking shots. I'll pour them. I don't fucking need them anymore. Because the hole in the heart that the drugs and alcohol was filling is slowly getting filled within by God and by Jason. And by doing that, it's allowing it to get filled in by Yankee and David and Isaac and Volvi and Marty. and friends that I've never had friendships like this before because I could take it or leave it. I'm not faking who I am to get it. So that means it actually holds when I have a real friend, they like Jason Lakritz. They don't like the creation I made of myself to get them to like it. And there's a fucking peace of mind when it's time to go to bed because I'm not keeping a web of lies organized so that tomorrow when you reach, I know who I'm just me, man. I'm a fucked up person. I make mistakes. I harm people every day. I do shit that I regret every single day. But I'm a human being and I love myself for that. And as I have another mistake that I'm going to get the opportunity to learn from, I know that it's just a matter of time till my God needs me to present that to someone who needs him to show him how. It's a privilege to be a fuck up. It's a privilege to be the black sheep. It's a privilege to be stuck in a head that is so loud. We just have to pause long enough to see the beauty in it. And once I was able to do that, it took me about the year mark of sobriety. 30 days, man, I felt awesome. Don't get me wrong, man. I wasn't physically dependent on a poison. But I was feeling emotions. By 60 days in, I'm remembering I never grieved my grandmother's death. By 2 years in, I'm realizing my mom doesn't fucking like me. And it's not because what I thought, which was because I'm a drug addict. It's just because she doesn't goddamn like me. Pardon the goddamn. I realized that the pain is good. And it's funny because as a drug-seeking heroin addict, I used to go to the hospital on a regular basis with fucking injuries so that the doctors would shoot me up with Dilaudid. And finally, one doctor finally pulled me aside. He goes, dude, you know what the best thing about being in pain is? I says, getting the Dilaudid? He goes, no, it means you're alive, you stupid asshole. Pain is life. Volvi, that's why I said, go back into that shell. Go have that misery back guarantee that being isolated and afraid to talk and afraid to live gives us, because that's not living, man. Falling down, being trust broken, mourning, grieving, that is life. It's not fucking pleasant. I'm not ever going to promise anybody life is Oreos and orgasms every fucking day. The beauty's in the pain, not while we're going through it, but when we get through the other side. Isaac, the first day you get to walk with a morning man, sit minion. Or go sit Shiva. Every bit of your pain that you're suffering through right now is going to be worth it. I promise you that. I'm not saying the pain is cool. It sucks. Breaks my heart that you're going through. But I know from my own suffering, that moment when you get to use this pain to help somebody that only you're going to be in the position to help, you're going to believe in God better than you ever have before. And God is preparing you today to be of service tomorrow. That's how I process my suffering. That's how I get through everything I get through. Because it's true. Think of your lives, guys. Think of everything you've ever fucking been through that almost broke you, that should have broke you and somehow didn't. Where'd the strength come from? And why? I'm on a mission to find drugs every day. But my drug isn't dope anymore. My drug isn't alcohol anymore. My drug is fucking working with my God, my higher power, to be of service to him, to help others who need it, because we're all lost. It's a painful world we live in. As Jews, we see it every fucking day because people don't want us to live. But that's true for humanity, man. And when we get to just love and feel and be one with our fellow human being, man, I love God. And every day of my life has been better as I've embraced this more and more and more. And it's a practice. Religion is a practice. God is a practice. Recovery is a practice, which means we're going to suck at it the first time we do it. But just like reading, just like writing, just like the first sport you ever fell in love with, just like fucking, we sucked at all of those things until we got a little better at it by practicing. And so for me, being a vessel for God takes practice. Being a man who could look in the mirror and not hate myself takes practice. Some days I don't do it as good as I would like to. Having enough grace to give myself the allowance to do so takes practice. Sitting here leaving knowing one of you might hate everything I said and not letting it affect my sleep tonight takes practice. But man, ask Michael Jordan if he thinks practice is worth it. Ask the best fighter pilot in the IDF if he thinks practice is worth it. Ask the best at anything they do if that practice, that struggle is worth it. And they're all going to tell you a million times over, yes. So guys, on March 14th, I hit 5 years of sobriety. And I got to look back at all the practice I've done. And I'll tell you this, it's worth it. One of the most painful things we experience physically, and I use this analogy all the time. I have no teeth, so y'all might not be able to relate. But a toothache, y'all ever have a toothache? It's that worst pain. Going to the dentist to get it fixed is scary as shit, which is why most of us, if you're like me, I suffer with that toothache for 2, 3, 4 more days than any other human I know before I pick up the phone and call for help. And then when I get there, I'm cursing, fuck this dentist, he's going to charge me X amount of money to do what? But when they pull that tooth, the pain is gone. Immediately. And that's what this work is, okay? When we're in it, it's there. I consider this self-help, this self-growth. We call it a 4th and 5th step in the program of AA, but it's all the same, right? This deep reflection. It's like an infection. You ever pour rubbing alcohol or hydrogen peroxide on a cut? It burns. Cleaning and cleansing and healing is supposed to hurt. That's not where the beauty is. It's when the scab becomes a scar. So guys, I feel like we're all going through this phase right now where they're pouring the alcohol in an open wound. It's okay. It doesn't feel good right now. But I think if we look back to an unbiased time in our life where we went through what we thought was the worst time of our life and reflect to how we view that time now, that's evidence, right? That's happened 100% of our time. We have to give that chance to say whatever it is I'm going through today is most likely going to occur in that same path. And if that gives us just a little bit extra peace, we have to appreciate and find gratitude in the beauty of that. And so that's the practice I do today. I wake up every morning. I thank God just for waking up. I'm not hungover. I'm not waking up fearful of how the fuck am I coming up with $150 today to get my fixed so I don't fucking puke all over myself. I get to wake up and ask God, how are you going to let me be of service today? You'll be happy. And I'm reading this book that the rabbi from Chabad here gave me. I think it's called The Power to Be or to Become. I'll get the title. And there's a story in there about a happiness study. Okay. And the study's taken place over 80 years. And what they found, and they went back to even Holocaust survivors, is the happiest people are those who give the most. And it was a story about a gentleman in the camp who continuously gave his last piece of bread every time, and yet he never starved. And he said, I'd rather starve than not share. And this type of thought process they determined over the years is what makes people happy. It's not accumulating. It's not hoarding. It's sharing. And it's sharing just out of the sake of love. The more I do that, now listen, I'm still fucking selfish. It's default, I'm human. But I'm aware of it now. That awareness is where the gold lies. I get to pause, right? Before jumping and punching and screaming and angry and manipulation, I get this moment to reflect. That work like what you guys do in Mahdi helps you get to, this breathing exercises, this awareness. And in that moment is where I get to determine, do I want to be the same son of a bitch I always was, or do I want to try to be better today?
I want to zoom in on two things. One is in regards to the shame, because the shame is for good reason.
Yeah.
So how do you actually forgive yourself, or how does one forgive themselves, or what does a person do with accumulated bags of shame? Zero in on that specific part of the steps and of the process. Like, how does forgiveness actually work? And like you're saying, like I look in the mirror and I see Hitler, and I've been beating the shit out of Hitler, and then I find out it's not Hitler, so the person beating is Hitler. That never goes away. There's this 20, 30, for some people 40, 50 years of just that much And maybe it's one answer. Maybe you can combine it in your answer. The other piece that I would like to ask of you is like the addiction of one's choice is a solution. Like if it's alcohol,
Yes.
drugs, sex, whatever the addiction of choice is not actually the problem. It's a solution. Like you described, the quiet of the mind. Even attempting to stop is really, really scary. And so my question is like, what does one do when it comes, specifically with no training, the pain, the thoughts, the negativity, maybe the shame, maybe that not forgiven, not a relationship with past that is forgiving, and with no fix? Like how?
Okay. Great questions. First and foremost, you have to make a change. So, for example, Monty, if I take $10 off your countertop and you catch me and you tell me, hey, whatever the case may be, let's look first how we forgive others, right? Somebody lied to you. You want to forgive. What do you ask for? Atonement and change, because apology without a behavior change is manipulation, right? So and this is why you're right, shame is good, because shame is God's way of telling me that what I'm doing isn't right. Okay. I don't feel shame for picking my kids up from carpool lane on time. I don't feel shame for tucking them in at night and telling them I love them. You shouldn't feel shame for what you just did with your son. You know what I did feel shame for? Not showing up to the school play when I said I would. You know what I did feel shame for? Taking their lunch money and buying crack with it, right? You don't feel shame for doing good things. It's almost like God's way of telling you you're fucking up. Shame is saying the behaviors I'm doing are wrong. We know right and wrong inherently, okay? The question is, do we want to listen to it or not? So the first thing is finding an awareness that I am feeling shame. What I'm doing doesn't sit right with me. It's a beautiful experience because now we have a choice. Do I want to continue doing it? As soon as you stop doing the behavior that's causing you shame, you're going to start growing away from the feeling of.
So forgiveness and change, like even the decision, have to go together.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's bullshit and it's going to accumulate and feel shitty again. It's not going to work.
Think about like your typical ex-husband story, right? Like, oh, he goes out with his friends every time and each time he accidentally cheats on, right? Like just that story. The woman will never forgive that man until he says, I'm going to stop doing that, right? Not because he said sorry, not because he cried or got her a new car or flowers. The forgiveness is going to come when he's like, you know what? I'm going to value my family and I'm not going to go out on Friday nights with my friends anymore. I'm going to be with my family. Then slowly but surely, not right away, he proves his grace, right? But then we have to ask about God. How does God forgive? Look at Yom Kippur. Look at Rosh Hashanah. God forgives us first and foremost, admitting we fucked up, promising to try to do better. That's the simple formula. But God's easier than ourselves. We're harder to forgive than anybody who's ever wronged us. But here's what it all comes down to. Here's why we're able to forgive ourselves. Number one, just because we do shitty things doesn't make us shitty people. First and foremost, that's a fact. I learned that in jail with some of the fucking people who are the worst people in the world. Some of them were amazing. Did they do something shitty? Absolutely. Do they deserve to be there? Sure. Does that make them a bad person? No. Good people do bad things on a regular basis. Go watch the movie John Q with Denzel Washington if you don't think so, right? Like legality and morality are two different things. So first off, who did you wrong? Did you wrong a law that has or did you wrong your own moral compass? And that's where the real shame comes from. I broke my own code. Okay, great. Let's stop doing that. Understand that when you did it, circumstances were different than today. And we can only make a decision with the information available to us at the time. So when I was 9 years old and I did something, or when I was 19 years old, I'm 43 now. I have a lot more information about life than I did then. I did the best I could. And I have the benefit of hindsight now to saying that was a shameful experience. In the moment, it was a good idea. Whether it was or wasn't, it was, or we wouldn't have fucking done it. So with the information available to me at the time, in the current set of circumstances, I did what I did. life goes on. Here's where it got good, Marty. I had an excellent therapist at rehab. So clearly I'm not in prison right now, and I'm supposed to be. So that means I got not guilty. I wasn't guilty. But I held on to that guilt and shame. Do you know what it's like to have a parent whose son is locked up? And no matter what they did or what they sold, they can't get me out. And I'm facing the rest of my life in prison. And I'm watching their hair get gray. I'm watching tears. I didn't do it on purpose, did I? I know I took 10 years off my parents' life. But did I do it on purpose? When I got arrested, was my motive that day to fuck my parents up? To ruin their life? To harm them? If you think the answer is yes, there's no way the answer was yes, right? Like, no. I was a kid. I was caught up. I was scared. I was terrified. I was living in a world that wasn't reality because I didn't know any better. And I did bad things. And the Jason today forgives the Jason then. Because I make what's called a living amends. A promise to myself to do better tomorrow. And forgiveness isn't a perfect science.
Yeah, and then the second piece is the urge. I'm deciding on something better. And then the wave, that wave of emotion, of negative emotion, of pain, or whichever it is, comes. Like for many people, and for me it was for many years and still is somewhat, not somewhat, for me it still is, plenty. It's like my nervous system doesn't have the tools sometimes to deal with very basic things.
I do the best I can. And when I fuck up, I apologize. Like, I own it. Look, man, I wish I could pause for 30 seconds every time I'm pissed. Sometimes I do. And sometimes, look, I'm going to be very honest. On my birthday, just this last year, I called my mom, F you, bitch, and the C word to my mother. 4.5 years sober, dude. I did it. Can't take it back. I want to do better next time. Understanding I'm only a human being, Monty. Sometimes I'm going to have a better capacity than others. Right?
Like a lot of acceptance of the reality and the humanness and the shadow side of.
Now, there's a double-edged sword to that. Because if I want that grace, and here's the trap of forgiveness, and this is where, to me, it's a beautiful set of dominoes. If I want the grace of forgiveness, I have to give it. And in the Lord's Prayer, which isn't a Jewish prayer, but it's a prayer we say at AA, says, God, forgive me how I forgive others. So the key to forgiving myself is accepting that others are doing the best they can in a fucked up situation. All the things that made me do something stupid in a bad time for me has to possibly be true for them. And so the better I get at forgiving others, the better I become at forgiving myself, because they're coinciding. If I'm just human and I can accept that I just made a mistake and I want God's forgiveness and my own forgiveness, then when somebody else does something human to me, why does my ego stop me? And so to answer your question, the better I get at forgiving others, which is an easier way to practice, it's always easier to fix other fucking people's problems than our own anyway. So think about it. It's a good logical start. If you can't forgive yourself yet and you don't have that skill set, the best place to begin is forgiving others. And as you start justifying and praying and figuring out why you're going to forgive them, use that same justification to forgive yourself. And here's what my therapist told me in rehab, because I carried a lot of guilt from, I call it the Tallahassee situation, when I got locked up. A lot of PTSD, a lot of trauma, a lot of fucking guilt, man. I was a criminal. It ruined my life, and it had a lot of damage to my parents. But she said, Jason, you know, you were only facing 25 years in prison. And I'm like, only? She's like, yeah, only. Meaning, even if you were guilty and even if a jury convicted you, they determined you should only suffer for 25 years. Here we are 22 years later, and you're punishing yourself worse than the judge was going to if you got convicted. Why?
Wow.
Why? Even if I did it, the sentence was 25 years. Why the fuck, me of all people, is it taking 30 years to forgive when the society, the judgmental society that we've all expressed a fear of, is saying the punishment for that is only 25? And so if society is saying, hey, after you let it go, she challenged me, why can't you? And she used my own thought process against me. Because I like to be a debater. I like logic. I like sound arguments that make sense, that aren't fallacies. So she said, I want you to come and defend the prosecution of yourself. Like, defend why. And if you can't, then there's no other alternative to let it go. And we did this practice. And I tried, man, because I hate being wrong. But when I put it to paper, there was no justification for holding this grudge against myself. There was just none, man. Now, up until the day I helped Dara, I wished it didn't happen. I wished I could have gone back in time and not did the shit I did. But here's the beautiful thing, and this is why I said, Yankee, God doesn't wear a watch. It took 23 years. But the day came. Now, Monty, if you ask me, I wouldn't go back in time and I wouldn't change that. By forgiving myself, I was able to help Dara. And by helping Dara, I don't even want to change it. I don't even regret it. As a matter of fact, it's something that makes my gratitude list probably 4 or 5 times a month. I am actually, no shit, grateful that I was locked up in the worst of conditions for as long as I was. And now, here's what's fucking cool about it. I'm in sales. When I have a judge telling me whether or not I'm going to spend the next 25 years in life based on his yes or no, how scared do you think when a prospect is about to tell me yes or no on a sale? How much do you think I care? How much anxiety do you think I have whether or not you're going to choose to do business with me when I had a judge holding my entire life in his hand, right? So think about how much better off I am in life. A girl, you're going to tell me no for a date? Cool. I had a judge that told me, no, I'm not going to ever see daylight again, right? Put things into perspective. And so I'm grateful for all the things that I could never forgive myself for. And as I start seeing that everything I hated about myself, every bit of fucking shame, everything I did to make myself the worst enemy has actually prepared me to be right here today, then next time I fuck up, I'm easier to forgive myself. Why? Because I know 5, 10, 15, or 20 years from now, it's going to have me right there. And right now, my life is amazing. I'm in Cozumel, Mexico with a wife who adores me, with peers who look up to me, with people who dedicated 2 hours of their night on their own to hear me, with a job that trusts me to work. And I was a junkie 5 years ago. So you earn the forgiveness. Now, as far as the solution, you're right. The drugs is a solution for all these problems. I will tell you this. When the cravings come, whether it's violence, whether it's aggression, whether it's drugs or alcohol, first thing to do is play the tape out. It's that misery back guarantee. I can always go back to using heroin. It's not going to cease existing. But if I really want to be honest and remember what the life like that was, I'm not going to do it. If that doesn't work, I got friends like you guys who won't let me fall because they love me for me and for all my fuck-up-isms. I have a sponsor that I call once a week. I help people. Here's the beautiful thing, Marty. If you're relying on me to be somewhere at 5:30 on the 2nd, I can't go get drunk or high on the 1st because y'all needed me. And so by giving my time as freely as I possibly can, I'm protecting my own sobriety. So by being unselfish, I'm being selfish. By loving you, I'm feeling worth. By giving you my pain, I'm not going to do that shit tonight. It's a counterintuitive paradox. The more we give away, the more we'll have. I was taught that life and happiness is like a huge bucket of gold. And as Jewish people, we might not understand this. And I mean this as a joke. We want to hold the gold stereotypically, right? We want all the gold. But imagine there's a pot that infinitely gets refilled under one condition. We're always giving away the gold. The pot will never go empty. Somebody told me life is like this with joy, with happiness, with money, with everything. The more of that I could give away, the more God is going to fill my pot. And I'm going to tell you something. Over the last 5 years, I've been the least selfish I've ever been. I'm still selfish. I'm a human being. I'm a sick guy. I'm the least I've ever been. Financially more generous than I've ever been. I've not been hungry once. And I haven't had financial insecurity since I started giving away every spare dollar I have. If you don't know how, pick up the phone and try to help somebody else. Whenever you're feeling self-pity, my sponsor says you get an hour of it or a night of it, depending on how big. When I got cancer, I got a whole night. When it was my mom being a stupid bitch, I got 5 minutes, right? But like, you allow yourself to feel and then go out and help somebody. The quickest way to get out of self-pity, which is where the cravings come from, which is where the desire to go fucking burn our life up all down again is the fuck it's, woe is me, my life is this, or it's unfair because this happens to me. When we get in that mindset, change our thinking to how can I go help somebody? And I don't care if that's going to the grocery store and putting carts away, standing outside somewhere picking up cigarette butts, where I'm at the beach, go pick up trash, or calling Yankee or Volvi or David and asking how their day is going. Not because you want to tell them how fucked up your day is going, which is what our mind's going to make us do. Pause it, actually just listen. And what you'll find, and I think this is true for me and most of us in here, is when you put yourself out there and you pick up that phone in the moment of self-pity and call someone, you actually start feeling a little guilty. Because I'm not meaning any disrespect here, but if I leave this call feeling self-pity for anything I'm going through, after watching the pain you guys are suffering in, that makes me a special kind of fucking stupid. It really does. And so again, by making a commitment and showing up to it, my problems seem a little less important today. My heart is so open to you guys right now and the challenges that you're facing, that all the fucking shit that I could have worked out on a one-on-one therapist appointment for an hour and a half, I'm free of. And so this concept of giving is the ultimate way to getting. It's true emotionally. Yankee, it's true with trusting. The best way to learn to trust is by being trustworthy. Volvi, the best way to impress someone is to not judge the next and let them impress you for who their character is instead of how much money they have or what kind of watch they have or how cool you think they are. And for me, just to strive to be better tomorrow, to be honest enough and courageous enough and strong enough as a man to look myself in the mirror tonight and say, you know what? I wasn't as kind as I should have been to that homeless person. I snapped at my wife. She didn't really deserve it. And now I'm going to go in the room and tell her I'm sorry. And if I see that homeless person again, I'm going to show him some dignity. And if it's not that one tomorrow, you know? And this is how each day we become a little less sick than we used to be. The book tells us, my book, which is Alcoholics Anonymous, says we're very sick people, Monty. We were very sick people. Well, if you're very sick, you don't get better tomorrow. When you're very sick, the recovery is, right? There's a saying, each step into the woods requires one step to get out of the woods. We didn't get here in one day. None of us got to where we're feeling in one day. We have to accept we're not getting out of the woods in one day either. So slowly but surely, chipping away. I didn't go from the Jason I was talking about at 4 years old to the Jason shooting up dope and facing the rest of his life in one day, right? That was a 20-year process. So I'm not going to go to the Jason that stopped using the dope to the Jason that walks around loving himself in a day. So I'm learning to have grace, to laugh at the fucking, man, it's not that serious. When I fuck up, I love being called out now because it's a temperature check. And when I get mad about being called out, it reminds me how much fucking more work I have to do. And when I don't, I get to, good job. My wife got to point out the time today where I was absolutely wrong, and I didn't tell her she's wrong. I didn't yell at her. I didn't do anything. I just said sorry, and I meant it. And you know what? That night was a lot better than the night before, right? Oh. So we practice.
Yeah.
And remembering we have never been good at anything our first time trying it. Everything that we're good at right now took a shit ton of practice. And so why should happiness or self-love or stopping addiction be any different? And when we accept that as a fact, I think it gives us that bigger picture. And celebrate the small victories, man. Celebrate that 1 second pause Even if you tell the guy fuck off after, celebrate that you paused a second before doing it because it's important. It is.
Yeah.
And then when you reflect, say, yeah, I still told him to fuck off, but at least I was able to pause this time. And maybe next time, and this is where prayer comes in, God, maybe next time you'll give me the power to pause for 2 or 3 seconds. Or the processing speed to shut the fuck up in the millisecond that I paused for. And now I got hope for tomorrow that when presented the same thing, I'll do a little better.
Thank you, Jason. The absolute honor and a pleasure to hear your wisdom and your story and you being vulnerable with your journey in real time while you're talking about forgiveness and putting it to use, like a past, putting it to use while you're doing it, inspiring us to do the same and find our spark of value in those dark corners. Thank you so much.